today's session is again us talking about net zero enabled value chains through digital twins. Um, it's again we would like to keep the topic very open to discussion. Feel free to stop me at any point, ask any questions, and keep it interactive where we can. So, firstly, I can only see part of you. So, Kara, if anybody raises a question, you might have to just shout out
Yeah,
to me.
no problem. Yeah.
So, just before we start, to give a brief overview, Value Chain won the Lighthouse 2 grant with SMDH to be able to build upon the concepts of total cost of ownership, uh, which includes carbon footprint within your value chains as a key parameter to identify your supply chains. So we will be getting into all of that. But to get started, when we talk about the state of industry today, a value chain itself is different parts of your both internal and external processes. So it links into your supply chain, it links to your internal processes, it links into your customer delivery and customer journey as well. When we talk about what's the key aspect about emissions and where they are starting to get accounted in for, what we start to see that as a general, about 20 to 30% of the emissions within companies are coming through their procurement or supply chain processes. 40 to 50% coming across within the manufacturing processes, where more aspects are being done on the products, and that includes both scope 1 and scope 2 emissions. 5 to 10% from warehousing, and then distribution and customer service aspects as well. So doesn't matter which aspects we're talking about, everything has an impact on emission today. Now, this wasn't necessarily a talking topic, going back a couple of years, as much, especially within the SME community as such. But what we are starting to see, there is upcoming and increased demand of ESG reporting and regulations by the OEMs, the primes, all of them requiring a net zero strategy for themselves and for their supply chains as well. Because in reality, you cannot be net zero if your supply chain isn't a net zero. But it's not a simple thing to do, and there's different aspects of what you can actually do about it. Now, one key aspect that I think everybody would be familiar with so far is, over the last couple of years, what we have seen is different world events happening and create, that having a massive impact on supply chains. And every year we have seen, new aspects coming about, and the disruptions that they cause in the supply chain starts to have economic impact on small businesses, large businesses, and so on. And when you think about it, in a world where Tesla is manufacturing, driverless cars, and they have all this prediction and data that they are harnessing to do that, they have to stop their car production because they can't get chips delivered in time to be able to manufacture the cars. So it's these two parts of the processes where we are starting to see that there's huge impact in supply chains coming in, and all of that is due to amount of data transparency that exists, the data collaboration that could be enabled across the supply chain to be able to make those predictions, to be able to understand where the impact would come in and be able to plan for it better. And as far as technology is concerned, the technology to do all of this is already there. And that's where the importance comes in, to be able to map your supply chains, have collaborations in your supply chain, and create a digital replica of your supply chain that you can interact with. Now, the way we look at engaging and building sustainable supply chains with the customers that we work with. And we've been working with aerospace tier ones for last couple of years. We're working with manufacturing companies doing tooling manufacturing, and construction sector companies. And what you've seen across all of them is the supply chain problems, 80% are same. They're 20% different in terms of what they call different things, and the importance of certain aspects, where such as aerospace needs a lot more traceability where, compared to some of the aspects within the construction sector, and so on. So we start to see that a lot of commonality across the different sectors and a lot of common problems happening. So it's quite important that we start to leverage best practices and be able to leverage digitization and advanced technologies to support us in building this sustainable supply chain approach. And the first aspect of this comes in from discovering. Some of you might already have thought about it or might agree, or I would be love to hear some contradicting thoughts on this as well. Is if you were to go and look out for new suppliers today, the only two methods of finding that is either speak to somebody you know or do a Google search. Does anybody disagree with that? No?
I think everybody's really quiet this morning, so they all obviously agree with you, or
I think that, yeah.
Oh, yeah, go for it.
Sometimes in the food industry, we are dictated by the retailer where the supply chain needs to be.
Okay. So again, you are told by from somebody you know, or being defined that these are who you can use, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's the point is if you were to, and your industry is obviously restricted in terms of some of those aspects that you have to follow, but in general principles as well, these are the only processes and approaches that are there today to be able to find suppliers. And what we start to see this trend and opportunity now in terms of leveraging data and AI to be able to identify and have validated information and first pass supplier discovery aspects happening through this. So some of the work that we have done with regards to this is we are able to, you would have seen a lot of directories that exist across UK from different sectors and what companies' different capabilities are. These directories are updated once and then pretty much left on the companies to fill that, keep it updated, and which doesn't really happen that much. And then also what we've seen from previous works that University of Warwick did with West Midland Marketplace is when they try to build this directory of capabilities of suppliers, they to get first validated data about 400 companies, and this is going back in 2012. It costed them over $1 million to do that activity, to speak to each of those companies, visit them, validate them, which still has a place. But what we start to see is that it very quickly becomes non-scalable in that. And where, all of us have seen the rise of OpenAI and Claude, and, what the AI capabilities are. And some of the key aspects that we're able to do with the amount of data that's available today is we built engines, which is able to take a company's core website and be able to extract from that, not just what company is specifically saying in keywords that it does, but also what the intent and what the relevance of that is. So we are able to know what the company does, what quality certifications it has, what products and services it offers, who are its current customers, link into company house data to be able to identify is the company, this not just the SIC codes, but underlying that, is it financially okay? Being able to look at social media data to be able to get sentiment information about those companies. Now, when we talk about manufacturing SMEs specifically, uh, some of that data is available, some may not be. And that's where some of the opportunity comes in from some of the government programs, such as Made Smarter, and what follows on, to be able to assist with filling those gaps in. But what we have seen is that through this process of being able to identify companies through capabilities, and building an AI engines, which is a capability first engine, you can identify partners and collaborators to support the discovery of supply chain. So you still have the human in the loop approach to validate that data, but it acts as a very good first interface to be able to gather that information and get you the relevant information on this today. And it's not just about what a company does today, because supply chains are not formed on just based on what a company does today. If you think about the pandemic, uh, most companies that started making ventilators had never been in healthcare previous to that. What they realized was actually they could pivot and actually do that job or do parts of that job, and they were able to build that. There were other companies who had similar capabilities, but they didn't have the awareness or understanding on how they would go about it. And that's the same issue that we start to see today across upcoming sectors such as space, such as hydrogen, battery manufacturing, and more. The capabilities are cross transferable, and the only reason companies don't do that is they think, oh, space is it requires something quite different to what we do today, and it doesn't. But that awareness isn't there. And again, this is where some of the power of capability matching AI comes into play massively, because if you can get a recommendation today from your Netflix account to say, hey, these are the movies we would recommend for you, based on your capabilities, you can get recommendation on these are the other sectors that you could actually apply your core capabilities into. Here are the gaps that you have based on your capabilities and qualifications versus what are required to enter these sectors. And some of the stats that I heard, which was really interesting, was 80% of revenue right now in space industry is being taken in by a handful of companies today, not because they do something specific, it's just because they are there. And I think that's something quite important that we can leverage through technology to level the playing field in certain instances. So when we take an example of this engine, a simple profile and classification that you're looking at, this is done purely through the AI engine, just taking the website as the input information in there. And it's already gets to an instant where, if I was training an intern or a graduate to actually go and do this analysis as a first pass for me to what they would get for me. But this is where we are able to train it more to be able to create that capability level identification and map out and build recommendations around where the opportunities lies and how we can build new supply chains. An example further ahead is a work that we've done in another project in mapping Liverpool region capability, especially within advanced manufacturing. And what we identified as a part of that was we have about 104 unique capabilities across 4 ontology levels that are created. And again, this type of information, both if you are a buyer, for example, or if you're looking for collaborators, or if you're a government body, this type of information in terms of identifying that capabilities and discovering those capabilities starts to add huge amount of intelligence to the decision making that you would do and starts to inform decisions better. And this is effectively one of the first aspects to start about when you think about net zero or low emission supply chains, because when you talk about supply chains, and historically it's been about who's the cheapest that we have, right? And where, how can we get that? What was previously not accounted in for was the carbon footprint that entails. And what we are seeing now is the total cost of ownership is not just linked into the cost, but also linked into what emissions are being tagged in as a part of that product coming in. And that, the scope 3 upstream emissions is a key aspect towards that. And as part of the project that we are doing with SMDH right now and with our customers, that's one of the key focus areas where we already had a system which allowed for supply chain collaborations by integrating into the ERP system of a customer. And due to that, we have information on a dynamic basis that is pulled in every hour about what purchase order line items you have open, who is supplying to you, where are they supplying things from, have advanced shipping notes which align with, when are the shipments coming, what routes, what methods of shipment is it? Is it air? Is it rail? Is it road? Being able to know what the weight of those products is, how often that you get that, and you can actually get a dynamic dashboard of your carbon foot scope 3 upstream analysis coming across your supply chain. What we have also been doing as a part of the project, which finishes at the end of January, is allow that data to then be added on top with suppliers about any emissions, even from a product level, that they can add in terms of from the average values of scope 1, scope 2 that they created, that is getting added to the product, because to accurately capture that level of information, you need to do a deployment of sensors and IoT devices at a supply chain and tiered supply chain levels, which is possible, but it is an exercise that you have to convince a lot of these companies to do. But what all of that starts to give is, starts to give you a true picture of where the supply chain stands. Are your emissions and carbon footprint happening with your critical suppliers, or is it happening with your non-critical suppliers? Because when it's happening with your critical suppliers, there's not a lot that you can do about it. But when it's non-critical suppliers, then that's where you start to look at reshoring or opportunities that might cost you slightly more in short term, but if you look at the total cost of ownership, your costs are actually lower on that.
Can I just jump in?
Yes.
If that's okay before you move on. So we've had a question, and I've got some questions as well. So
Yes.
Somebody's put, as you mentioned, cost was once the main factor for supply. Yeah. However, yeah. Now with environmental factors considered, do you think that there will be legislation brought in around importing products of a certain environmental sort of score/emissions?
Yes, absolutely. I think we are starting to see some of the legislations come to play. It's different for different sectors, I must say. And I think where it stands today, when it becomes a legislation, then everybody would have to follow it. Right now, it's a USP that companies are trying to build out and being able to offer. Because remember, even when it's not a legislation right now, all the big OEMs at tier ones and primes have a net zero strategy and a target in place. And due to that, they are being pushed hard to have, validate any suppliers that they are onboarding and make sure that, if the price across two suppliers are same or slightly over, they will prefer the one with less emissions or who is more sustainable. So it's becoming a competitive factor already. But what we would definitely see that, in garment industry, for example, you're starting to see information about emissions being tagged into the product itself, being shipped across. So we definitely see, similar legislations coming in place. How quickly that happens, that's based on the government policies that come into play. But, we are starting to see some of that action happen. Having said that, that while that's will be definitely a motivating factor for a lot of businesses, that when legislation kicks in, we'll do something about that. There's a benefit and a value proposition to your business today by adapting that now.
Lovely, thank you. Also, obviously, the whole emissions journey, and it's very new to companies, isn't it? And it's ever changing, like with government legislation. Is there a place where companies and manufacturers can have a look to keep up to date with this sort of ever changing? Because I think it's probably quite difficult, isn't it? And obviously, you've spoken about like the different scopes and things. So where do they like look to find out what these mean and get more information about this sort of stuff?
Yeah. So in terms of source of data, so there's a lot of publicly available sources available today. And apart from the normal search engines that I utilize to find some of these sources, what I prefer, and some of you might be doing same now, is utilize some of the chat AI platforms to be able to actually also highlight you some of the potential sources or answer some of the questions that you might have, because these platforms are already intelligent enough to be able to give you basic definitions about which you would have to go to specialized consultants previously to do. So even to build your basic knowledge, and how that could be tailored to yourself, I would recommend people to be able to utilize some of these chat OpenAI platforms, which you can freely access as well on the lower tiers. But outside of that, speak to partners. SMDH is a great example. You can reach out to them and they can connect you to partners like us. We work with partners who are working and deploying solutions and startups for scope 1, scope 2 capture and reporting, which captures emissions due to your water line, your electricity utilization, your machine utilization, your travel aspects within employees and other things within your factory, and what the standards that they're utilizing. And there's a good community that's already building up around all of this that we can share. So I think keep asking the question and getting references to people who can answer that for you is one of the places I would say. Obviously, after this webinar, feel free to reach out to me or Kara or the SMDH team to connect if you guys are interested to know more. When it comes to giving a high overview on the types of emissions, scope 1 and scope 2 specifically capture your in factory and link to your manufacturing or your company's emissions. As I said, and that is everything that is directly cause of the things that you guys are doing today. So manufacturing products, machines utilization, the energy utilizations that are happening. Scope 3, and again, there's multiple aspects of this really. So it's not simple at all to interpret some of this. But you have upstream scope 3 emissions, you have downstream scope 3 emissions, you have the emissions which are added from the point of excavation of the material that is going into the components of the products that you're doing. And the deeper you go, the reliance of that data and access of the data sometimes become more difficult. But what we start to see is, instead of using a generalized average number across your supply chain or across your manufacturing on a annual or biannual basis, which customers are starting to see through, is you need to start to showcase how you're capturing that data. So it's important to be able to understand where your emissions are coming from. So to be able to use systems which can give you that information, to be able to leverage some of the technology, and to be able to leverage some of the support that's already out there to help you understand and better make decisions with regards emissions. And you may not implement an end-to-end, data and IoT connectivity across your factory and supply chain to get all that information, but you need to know what you don't know. And that's critical, because that will help your data gathering and reporting back into both to your customers and your supply chain, and how you go about improving that. Any other questions?
Lovely. Yeah, we've got another question. Will businesses be able to select who sees the information about their business? If all this is public about each company, will this reduce powers for trade?
Yeah, so you're right. So the how this information is shared right now will let's say that there is not necessarily one go-to platform to do this on its own. Um, the way we do our deployments and for our customers, the suppliers sharing that information is just between the supplier and their customer. There's no third party, anybody else who can see that data, because that's where the decision making and the awareness stands in. And that's what's being shared. It's not published publicly, and we are not effectively creating a public database of emissions, because what we are trying to tap into and support the problem statement is around how do we get dynamic data about scope 3 emissions specifically to our customers, which they can leverage for their decision making analysis and performance improvement across their supply chains. There are other platforms that do enable you to share that information in a public domain, but I think it starts back with how open you want to be with that. You can create a lot of marketing material around what your emissions are, what you're doing, what your plans are, what your targets are, or you can keep it restrictive to just share it with your customers as a part of the activity. So the choice is completely on the businesses. There's no mandate where they have to give share that sent openly with everybody, but there are benefits if you start to create that narrative around yourselves and be able to share that information. You start to do get recognition as well, which is, again, as a business, a really good thing.
Got another question. We're on a roll now. They said, this is from Edward, so it says, is this a centralized database, and are you using Web 2 or Web 3 decentralized technologies?
So right now we have a custom database which is only for the private deployments that we do for our customers. It is using Web 2 technologies. We are not using blockchain technologies at the moment because, again, the type of information that we are relaying is relatively straightforward and doesn't need the decentralization on this. As I said, this is the type of information that is already the data we already had within the system. The analytics and decision making is what intelligence we are starting to provide through that from the platform. We do see an opportunity with utilization of Web3 on leveraging the decentralized network on building more intelligence recommendations, especially when it comes to discovery aspects of supply chains as well.
That's all for now.
Okay. So to just mention another point about the discovering through the capability approach is Valuechain has been active with a lot of trade bodies in UK and engaging with everybody from West of England Aerospace to Farnborough Aerospace to South Space Clusters to Additive Manufacturing UK and reshoring. And what we have seen across working with these different sector trade bodies is there are member companies that are part of these and sometimes common ones. We are leveraging that network to allow for the capability identifications and discovery, because we are allowing for these individual communities to be able to connect to each other and be able to, again, support the supply chain discovery, which is, again, validated set of companies, and then the companies are able to share their profiles with aspects about if they want to show what their emissions potentially are or sustainability, but it's all the ownership of all of that and what they share and who they share that with still remains with the companies. So discovering suppliers, collaborators through capability is one of the key aspects that we have learned and we've utilized and we continue to use to build supply chains and new supply chains and improved supply chains today. So I'll quickly show a very simple example. So this example is from one of our existing platforms that we are further modifying as well. Let's take a minute to run. And what you would see here is being able to get this type of, not just the visualization, which a lot of companies do like with us, being able to actually view and see your supply chain, which you'll see in a bit, in this format. Becomes quite interesting, because once you start to visualize where, what your supply chain looks like today, and being able to, understand from the supply chain collaboration and the things that we do, where the risks are within your supply chain, where cybersecurity, ESG, and others. That is the type of thing that your procurement teams, your buying teams, your strategy teams start to utilize for decision making. And this aspect becomes quite important. And where when we talk about data connectivity within supply chains and through the platforms, is what we start to leverage in terms of building this interactive digital twin of your supply chain today. And that's, digital twins can mean a lot of things to many people, but in reality, all you're trying to do is, create a digital replica of what's already happening in the real world. And that's enabled through data and the right systems being in place. And that's what starts to give you the power to say, okay, this is what's happening. And this is where, when you start to feed the latest AI engines and LLMs with this type of data and decision making, what it starts to do is, a lot of times previously, you need to have a supply chain domain expert being in the company for 20 years to be able to understand some of these trends. You are able to add some of those knowledge bases into some of these engines to help you actually give initial recommendations. It's not a perfect system yet, but this is where the benefit starts to come in straight away, is actually to be able to understand what could go wrong, what the potentials are, where the risks are, to be able to then act upon that and improve your supply chain, rather than waiting and saying, actually, I can't deliver this £1 million order anymore because one supplier who was which was the only supplier who could supply me a specific screw has gone bust, cannot deliver due to some reason and stuff. And those are places which that starts to indicate to you in terms of dual sourcing. And understand your supply chain resilience that exists as well. So there's a whole form of activities that happen with this regard, which again starts to help you with that decision making process within your supply chains. And this, just an example of some of the profiles that we have across supply chain companies, the approvals that the companies have, including approval matrices across the supply chain in terms of, for different sectors, what approvals they have, what maintaining, and this type of data being maintained through the AI engines on a dynamic basis by linking into the certification databases or through the websites of the companies as well, starts to, again, doesn't solve the problem 100%, but it starts to assist the people in the roles to be able to make better decisions with this. So value chains doing the end-to-end connectivity from supply chain discovery all the way to the delivery and quality aspects coming in. And we have connected platforms that utilizes this connectivity, supply chain collaboration to enable this information to happen. So everything that's happening before parts come into your factory, to everything that's happening once parts leave your factory, go to the customers and return warranty coming in, we are doing that end-to-end connectivity. What we don't do is ERP, and that's what we tap into to connect, get that type of data and enable the collaboration within the supply chain and the value chain aspects. But for us, the biggest learning has been, and through this project, as you're learning as well, is about the data to do all of this, understand emissions and improve, has already been there. It's just that we haven't looked at that data in that way, or there might be some fields that were missing that can now be added in and captured. So bulk of the stuff already existed with our existing customers and the data that they were capturing, but we can give them additional leverage and insights through this to be able to make better decisions. And that starts to enable the next level of value proposition for our customers and for us to be able to make innovation with both net zero and AI, not for the sake of it, but actually that's going to add value to the end customer for us. So who are we looking for right now as part of the SMDH program? We are looking for any technology partners who have complementary technologies that we can interact with, connect with, and being able to add more value to our existing and new customers. As a part of the program, we are onboarding 5 SMEs to come on free of cost for the SaaS part of the platform for supply chain, and only carry out the integration cost to their ERP systems in year 1. And we're looking for research and industry member organizations to, again, support some of the research aspects that we're doing. As a part of the SME onboarding, we've already got 3 SMEs signed on for the program. The program ends in January, so we are closing that by mid-October for the remaining slots. But anybody, even if you don't fit into this and you're just interested in understanding, what scope 3 emissions might be, because scope 3 becomes difficult if you try to do on you, because it links into supply chain. So you need to enable the collaboration to be able to get that type of data. And that's what we've been doing for the last couple of years. So, we have that domain knowledge. If nothing else, we can share that. And if that helps, that's great for us. So any questions, anything else anybody wants to ask, raise, or disagree with as well? I'd be happy to hear that.
I haven't got any more questions at the moment. So if sort of an SME or anybody sort of does want to work with you, is it best just to sort of email yourself directly and get in touch, and then you can sort of talk them through that process?
Absolutely. So if they get in touch with me, or if they get in touch with SMDH to get the connection, or they go to the Valuechain website and there's a banner there showcasing the same thing, and they can fill in your information, and we'll get somebody from our team to set up a call with you as well. And outside of that, if connect to me on LinkedIn. If there's any questions that you have on this topic, any thoughts you want to share, I'm more than happy to have a discussion and share our knowledge. It doesn't have to be necessarily any commercial things. We are more than happy to share knowledge wherever it's relevant, and anything that we can do to add value, we'll be more than happy to. And if we can connect you to anybody within our network who can help you, then we'll do that as well.
Yeah, I was just going to say, obviously, as part of the SMDH project, we've got a community, which I'm sure you're already part of, Nishant. So I think that's a really good place as well for companies to join, that and share sort of good practice and have that sort of open conversation and ask questions. But yeah, I think it's a case of just getting in touch, isn't it? If you do have any questions with any of us, really. But has anybody got? Oh, we think we've got another one. Sorry, it pops up and then hides it. It says, are you currently working on any research projects on textile supply chains?
Not directly. We have a Canada-based textile cluster who works with us, but we are not working on any specific research projects on that. Our domain expertise, and this is where we want the research partners to support and come in, is aerospace, manufacturing, constructions, and now getting into space. We have domain expertise on. Other industries, we know the supply chain aspect, but we more than welcome to do collaboration with other, textile, food and drinks manufacturing, and other sectors where we can support and utilize their domain knowledge to fill in the gaps.
Hopefully that answers your question, Kiara. Have we got any more questions before we sort of look to close? Yeah. How does digital twins come into play in supply chain optimization? Yeah, so again, I think it's when you start to capture the data and being able to see the type of map that I was showing you and understand
where the restrictions within your supply chain is, you start to be able to run scenarios on the what if analysis, right? So the what if analysis then allows you to know, okay, if these parts come late, what's going to happen? If you have a blockage within one of your suppliers due to any of the world events that's happening, which you've seen happen way too often over the last few years. Do I have an alternative supplier? How does that impact me? You can't do any of that until you start to gather the data in your supply chain. And then once you build that scenario in there, what you do is you integrate that into the platform to be running on an active alert basis, because when any of those triggers happen, the system already alerts you that this is a potential scenario that might happen in there. So those are some of the things that we see from supply chain optimization that gets enabled through digital twins.
We've had somebody asking if they're happy for your contact details to be passed on.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I will share the slides as well at the end of the session, and Nishant's contact details as well, and the recording, so everybody will have that as well. So please just pass on and share.
Awesome. And the only thing I would like to say before we end is, firstly, thank you for attending and asking questions, which is great. And also, if this session's at least giving you a chance to think about your business or your partners and scope 3 and emissions and how that might link in, I think then you think that it's been a good effort from us, and anywhere we can help, do get in touch with us.
Oh, we've got one more question before we go. Could you please tell something about R&D collaborations you were looking at?
Yeah, I think again we can get in more details if my contacts will be shared. So just get in touch, and we can share a bit more about some of the innovate projects that we're already doing. The SMDH project and the type of scope of projects that we already look to do the R&D collaboration with.